How's everybody doing this morning? Doing good? That song makes you feel a little bit better, doesn't it? It's what the world needs now. What the world needs now. I don't know if you guys are aware, but this is Valentine's Day weekend. Anybody? The guys are thinking, oh no, I missed it. It sneaks up on me every year. And Lene and I'll just tell you, we don't do a lot of celebration of romantic kind of things, anniversaries and Valentine's Day. And it's because it's always Valentine's Day at our house. What? Disbelief? No, but it's a special weekend, right? And guys, don't forget to do something. Kyle, I know you... Done? Done. Kyle puts us all to shame. It must be wonderful being married to you. I can't imagine how fantastic it would be. So what I wanted to do this weekend is I wanted to go, and we talked about this in planning meeting, and I told them in planning meeting, I said, I want to find the greatest romantic love story in the whole Bible. And so we began to make lists, and I wrote them all down. And then this last week, I'm going to grab my water. This last week, I went through and I looked at all of the love stories in the Bible. So let me just ask you, whenever you think of a love story in the Bible, what are some of the love stories that you think about? Abraham and Sarah. Okay. Rachel and what's his name now? I can't remember. Rachel and who? Jacob, right? Jacob? Nobody said Ruth and Boaz? Come on, y'all. Anybody else? Okay, so I went through and I looked at all of these love stories and I just couldn't find one. And some of you are thinking, well, there's Mary and Joseph and all of, all the things surrounding Mary and Joseph. And it's a good love story. And you know what I realized? I realized that, man, real life is not like Hollywood. It's not. Every now and then, like maybe around Valentine's Day or an anniversary or something, I will, gather myself together and I will tell Lene, and she loves it whenever I say this, but I'll tell her, hey, let's find a rom-com movie to watch. And she'll say, really? And I'll say, yeah, let's find one to watch. And so we'll find a movie that has some, people like Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson and people like that who do all these romantic comedies. And we'll watch one of those movies. And it makes her so happy to watch one of those movies. But, I realized this week when I was thinking about it, there are just not that many times in real life when the guy is in love with the girl and the girl is in love with the guy, but they can't quite make it, and get together. And then the girl gets in a limo and she heads to the airport because she's going to fly off to Europe and he's never going to see her again. And he gets on his motorcycle and he runs down the limo through traffic and everything. And he finally gets her and they kiss and that's the end. It never happens that way in real life, does it? And it doesn't happen that way in the Bible. And the thing that I realized, and I want to really be serious right here, the thing that I realized is that there's only one really awesome, amazing, out of this world, supernatural, romantic love story. And you know what I'm talking about. It's between Jesus Christ and his church, his bride. Man, it doesn't get any better than that. Is my microphone loud enough for y'all? Amen. I must be losing my hearing. So that's the story. And we had already decided that we're going to do that story at the end of the series. So you'll have to come back. You'll have to stay tuned for that one. And so the one that I picked for today is the most unlikely love story that you would ever think of if you're thinking about romance. And if you're thinking about, the best love story in the Bible, it's just not the one that you would think of. And the story that we're going to talk about today is the story of David and Bathsheba. It's not the one you would think of, is it? Because it's not their love that's so impressive, is it? It's the love of God. Man, it's the love of God. And the title of this message is really important. In fact, I'm serious when I say this. I want you to think of this title. I want you to hear the title. I want you to think of it. And every day as you go to God and you repent of your sins and you embrace the righteousness of God, every day I want you to think of this title. But I'm not going to give it to you yet because we have to get into the story before I can give you the title. All right? So just remember, when I give it to you, it's important. And I want you to remember it. So we're talking about David and Bathsheba today. And I just saw this last night, and I never have seen it before. And I just thought, this is kind of crazy. But isn't it such a coincidence that her name is Bathsheba? Bathsheba? Her name could have been anything else but Bathsheba. I just thought, wow. I know that's probably not what they called her back then, but in English, Bathsheba. Okay. I'll have to get over that. So let me tell you the story. I've told it to you before. It's a great story. It's an amazing, amazing story. But, just so we don't think that Bathsheba is a victim here, didn't she know that she lived next door to the king? Or didn't she know where she lived? I mean, if you live next door to the king or across the street from the king or in visual proximity of the palace, you get it, right? I mean, that does not go unnoticed that the king lives right there. And if the king is walking on his roof, if he makes a habit of walking on his roof, which is what they did back then, there were square houses, flat roofs, and people walked on their roof. And it was like a patio kind of thing. And if he walks on his roof, you notice that, right? So Bathsheba, she knew. That's right. She knew. She was not ignorant. She was not completely ignorant of what was going on. Just wanted you to know that there are two parties involved here. Okay? So one night Bathsheba goes up on her roof and she is bathing on her roof and the king is walking on his roof and he looks over and he sees her and then he is struck with lust over Bathsheba. She's a beautiful woman, and he has her brought to the palace, and they make love, and they begin this relationship. But the Bible says that they made love, and what came out of that was a pregnancy. And whenever Bathsheba told David that she was pregnant, David did something terrible. He had her husband Uriah brought to him from the battlefield. Now, let me just give you a little background. This is the time of year when armies would go to battle. And David used to go to battle. He used to. It was what made him famous. Saul has killed his thousands, and David has killed his 10,000s, they used to chant in the street when David would come home from battle. But David had stopped going to battle, and he stayed home. And in order to cover up his sin, he had Uriah, who was a great man. You know, the men were called the mighty men of valor. They were heroes. They were loyal to a fault. They were loyal to their God. They were loyal to their king. They were loyal to their brothers. They were men's men. They were tough. They were courageous. They were great men. And Uriah was one of the greatest men. And Uriah was brought in from the battlefield, and David said, I want you to give me a report. And so he gave him a report. And then he said, now, Uriah, go home to your wife. He's trying to cover up his sin. So he says, go home to your wife. And Uriah did not go home to his wife. He slept at the door of the palace that night. He wouldn't go home to his wife. And the next morning, David brought him in and said, why didn't you go home? And he said, how could I do this thing? And you think about it. This is a man who came in from the battlefield, and he's talking to his king, and he says, how can I do such a thing? When my brothers are on the battlefield, how could I come home and go to my house and sit at my table and eat my food and sleep in my bed? How could I do this thing? I cannot do such a thing while my brothers are on the battlefield. And so David decides to keep him over another day. And that night, David brought him in for dinner, and they had a meal together, and David got him drunk. And he thought, surely if I get him drunk, he'll go home and we'll be able to cover up this sin. Do you know that some people will keep their character even when they're drunk? I mean it. Some people, no matter what position you put them in, there are some things they will not do. I think about Bathsheba. She didn't have to participate. She could have said, kill me now, but I am not going to betray my husband. I will not betray my God. I will not betray my family. I will not do it. She could have said that. I think about Lene. I can't imagine that there's any man that is good looking enough and rich enough that would cause her, not because of me, because of her, because of her character. She wouldn't do it. Kill me if you have to, but I will not do it. That's the kind of character that some people have. This is the kind of character that Uriah had. Even when he was drunk, he wouldn't go home. No. I'm going to tell you something. That's the kind of character that God wants to put into us. That's the kind of character that God is shooting for in you. That's the kind of potential that you have. That no matter what circumstance you are put in, no matter how you are squeezed, no matter how you are stressed, what comes out of you is what comes out of Jesus. Love. That's what the series is about. Love. That's what the world needs. The world needs to see. You turn on the news? Anybody still turn on the news? I try not to even watch it. It's depressing. And it's hatred. There's hatred everywhere. On both sides, all around. It brings hatred up in my heart when I watch it. I don't like it. And what the world needs now, and what God is longing to give the world, is His love through the church. If you think that your role in the church is small, you're mistaken. If you think that your role in this world is insignificant, you've got it all wrong, because this is not a minor thing. This is the main thing. If you're God and you're looking down on this world today, it's the main thing. The main thing is I've got to get my love out to this world through my bride, through my church. That is my mission. That is the church's mission, and that is your mission. So David tries to cover up his sin. He can't cover up his sin, so he sends Uriah back with his own death notice in his pocket. And it says to Joab, I think it's Joab, the commander, it says, put him in the fiercest part of the fight and withdraw from him so that he will be killed. And so David had Uriah killed. And then one day not long after that, knock, knock, knock on the door. Who is it? It's Nathan, the prophet. Nathan comes in and he says, God knows what I won't tell you the whole part of it. It's awesome. But he says, God knows what you've done. You had an adulterous affair with Bathsheba. She conceived a child, and you brought Uriah in to cover it up. And when when he would not cooperate and you could not cover it up, you had him murdered. You murdered him with a sword of the Ammonites. And the first thing out of David's mouth was, I have sinned against God. And do you know what the next thing out of Nathan's mouth was? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. People are not like this. People are not like this. God, when we say, God, your ways are higher than our ways, your thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Nothing could be more truthful in this world than that. Our thoughts are down here. Our ways are down here. His thoughts and his ways are so high. And the first thing out of Nathan's mouth after David said, I have sinned against God, he admitted his sin against God. The next thing out of Nathan's mouth is, God has forgiven you. Boom. Like that. That's the kind of God we have. Man, that's what the world needs. That's what the world needs. That kind of love. I wonder if we could be so quick with our forgiveness. Do you see that we have a ways to go as a church, as people? See that we have a way. I keep saying this, but there is a becoming. We are becoming the sons of God, the huios, where we have the inheritance of the Father, where we are heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ, where we are sons of the living God, where the love that comes out of us is the love not of people, but the love of Christ that comes out of us. So, after Nathan delivers the news to David that he's been found out, and he tells him, he says, because of what you have done, this child cannot live. And that's where we pick up the story. After Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child, and Uriah's wife had born to David. You see how the scripture puts that? That Uriah's wife had born to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and spent the nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. And this went on for 7 days. On the seventh day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought, while the child was still living, he wouldn't listen to us, and when we spoke to him, he wouldn't listen to us when we spoke to him. How can we tell him now the child is dead? He may do something desperate. They were worried that if they told him the child was dead, that David was going to do something desperate, like, commit suicide or kill himself, something like that. David noticed that they were talking and whispering among themselves, and he realized that the child was dead. He said, is the child dead? They said, yes, the child is dead. He is dead. Then David got up from the ground. After he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, he went into the house of the Lord and worshiped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request, they served him food, and he ate. Now, the guys around him, they couldn't understand this. His attendants asked him, why? And I like this relationship. You know, his servants were around. They loved him. They served him. They had this relationship with him that they could talk to him. He could talk to them like real people, like real friends. And they're like, why are you acting this way to the king? Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. Why are you acting this way? And I loved David's answer. He said, while the child was, you know why I love it? Because it's just real and it's honest. And he's just being honest with them about his own human nature. He said, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? Who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. See, he knew a gracious God. And he thought, maybe I can change God's mind. He said, but now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. So it was time to stop mourning. It was time to worship. The first thing he did was he cleaned up, he worshiped, he ate, and he went on with his life. You can read the whole story, and there are consequences to sin, and you can see all the consequences that Nathan talked about with David about this sin. But after the child died, he got up and he got back to his life. And it says that then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. And the Lord loved him. The Lord loved him. You know what Solomon means? It means peace. Solomon means peace. It comes from shalom. It means peace. So his name means peace. And because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet, same guy, Nathan the prophet, to name him Jedediah. So he had two names, Solomon and Jedediah, which means loved by the Lord. Loved by the Lord. So Solomon, he had these two names with two different meanings. So Solomon meant peace, and Jedediah meant loved by God. Loved by God. Are you ready for the title of the message? It's a good one. It's a good one. It's one that I'm going to remember. It's one I want you to remember. And that is, there may be sin in your past, but there's a Solomon in your future. I don't think I read that loud enough or something. There should be more excitement about there. There may be a sin in your past, but there is a Solomon in your future. Thank God, right? Thank God that there is a Solomon in our future. The sin could not have been any worse. I mean, could it have been any worse? I mean, he could have killed more people, I guess. It was such a terrible sin. But the first thing out of Nathan's mouth is, God has forgiven you. Thank God. There are sins. Are there sins in your past that haunt you? I mean, really, think about it. You don't have to raise your hand, but are there sins in your past that haunt you? There are sins in my past. I haven't killed anybody to my knowledge, but I have committed some sins that, they make me cringe when I think about them. I mean, they really make me cringe when I think about them. I think back and I think, how could I have done such a thing? But you know, God forgives me, and he forgives you. And I'm going to show you what it looks like to have a Solomon in your future. You may have a sin in your past. You have a Solomon in your future. You have to understand also, when you look at the consequences to David's life and his family and all of the stuff that went on with David's family, that was under the old covenant. We have a new covenant, y'all. we have a new covenant. And Hebrews talks about this new covenant, and it says, I will put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. You don't have to just go and memorize all that long, pages and pages of law now, because God, he just puts it right in here, and he puts it right in here. He said it. I'll put my laws in their minds. They'll just think, and they'll know what to do. They'll just think, and they'll know right from wrong. I will put my laws in their minds, and I will write them on their hearts. There will come times when they will need love, and it will just pour out of their hearts. That's me and you. That's me and you. And then I'm going to skip down to 12. It says, for I will forgive them their wickedness and remember their sins no more. I don't want anybody remembering my sins. It's bad enough that I do. It's bad enough I remember my sins. I don't want anybody else remembering my sins. And if God says that he won't remember my sins, hallelujah, thank God, praise God. I'm not real Pentecostal, but man, I can raise my hands and say hallelujah to that. Okay? How about you? Yeah? I will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more. That's our God. That's who we serve. I just don't think it gets any better than that. It doesn't get any better than that. Some people preach prosperity. Does it get any more prosperous than this? So, back to our title. There may be a sin in your past, but there is a Solomon in your future. Let's talk about Solomon. Solomon was not a perfect guy, but man, he was pretty awesome. Jesus even talked about Solomon. His famous Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about Solomon. He says, look at the lilies in the field. He says, they don't toil or spin. In other words, they don't make cloth. They don't make clothes, right? But even Solomon, in all of his splendor, in all of his glory, as beautiful as he was arrayed in his garments. Even Solomon was not as beautiful as one of these flowers in the field. Who did he compare them to? Not David, not any of the other kings, nobody else. Solomon. Solomon was the one that Jesus talked about in that great Sermon on the Mount. All right, this is what Solomon did. God let Solomon build the temple. He wouldn't let David build the temple. He let Solomon build the temple. And so I want us to learn from this, and I just want to tell you real quick that God has a project for you to do. God has something for you to do. I'm going to save it for the end. I'm going to save this for the end. But God has a project for you to do. This is what I love about our church, is that we're always doing projects, right? We see a need, and we jump on it, and we do a project. And I love that about us. I'm a guy that likes projects. I like to do projects on my own. I've always got a project going on. People, when I start telling them about all the things I'm doing, they say, how do you have time to do all this stuff? And it's just in me. I like to do things. I like to do projects. And God has a project for you to do. I promise you, he has a project for you to do. We're going to go back to the Old Testament, and we're going to look at a new covenant prophecy. It says, then you shall call. This is why it's so important, y'all, that we understand our role and understand who we are as the church and understand our role. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. This is the kind of God that I love to serve. If you take away the yoke from your midst and the pointing of the finger and speaking wickedness. I love this. If you take away the yoke, you know what the yoke is? The yoke is the burden. Don't go to a church that's going to burden you down. If you're going to a church and listening to people who are teaching you how burdensome Christianity is, stop it. Go somewhere else. If you take away the yoke, the burden from your midst, and the pointing of the finger, the accusation, stop doing that. And the pointing of the finger and speaking wickedness, and if you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. How many of you would like to have no more darkness in your life? I raise my hand to that. I don't want any more darkness in my life. And he's saying that your darkness, then your light shall dawn, and the darkness, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. Your darkness will be light. That's what I want in my life. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like a watered garden. The old King James says a well-watered garden. You shall be like a well-watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Your spring is always going to spring up. It's never going to run dry. How many of you want that kind of water in your life? Okay? Those from among you shall build the old waste places, the things that have been dried up and dead and no good. Guess what? He's given us some projects to build up the old waste places. I'll bet you that in this room there are 50 dead relationships that God could revive. I bet there are. I bet there are. That's our job. That's the kind of people we are. We build up the old waste places and raise up the foundations of many generations. And you shall be called, I love this, my favorite part. You shall be called the repairer of the breach. The enemy has breached something in this world. He has breached man's relationship with God. He breached it. In the garden, he breached it. The relationship was there. It was strong. It was together. Here comes Satan with his words of wisdom. And he comes in and he just, snake analogy. And he breaks it apart. He breaches the relationship. And we are going to be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. God has a project for you to do. I was going to save it, but I'm not going to save it. This week, again, I got a chance to go. It was yesterday. I went over to the Afghan family that we are supporting, and I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. And the thing that I love, maybe I haven't told you this, but one of the rules, I guess it's the government rules, right, Ben? We're not allowed to try to convert them to Christianity. Can you imagine how many churches would be bringing families over if they thought they could convert them to Christianity, or that they could, get something out of it? Oh gosh, man, don't get me on my. I'm sorry. Some things rile me up really, really quick, but we can't do that. And we have no intention of doing that. And when I see people show up and they're working, and I'm talking about them, I'm talking about y'all. I'm talking about some of you that are sitting right here, that I saw when I went over there yesterday, and I see people working, and I see people who are giving with no prospect of anything in return. Not even for the church. Not even, I mean, there's only one motivation. It's the love of Christ. You just can't get around it. And when you see the pure love of Christ being demonstrated, some people say, well, it's not about works, Rob. It's about It's about grace. God's grace is not about works. Let me tell you something. There is a spirit and there is a feeling. There is a thing that you can witness when the people of God begin to work that you won't ever find anywhere else in the world. It's true. You won't find it anywhere else in the world. When God's people go to work, it's a spiritual thing. It doesn't get any more spiritual than that. And I love the fact that we have this project going right now. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. One of the most beautiful things I've seen, and I don't know how long. It's just a great thing. So, God let Solomon build the temple, and God gave him a gift. God gave him a gift. I want to tell you about the gift. But before I do, I want to tell you that God has a gift for you to use. God gave Solomon a gift to use, and God has a gift for you to use. In fact, he has multiple gifts for you to use. Sometimes it just takes somebody who's willing to say yes. Just, yes, Lord. I'm open. I'm open. God has a gift for you to use. So this is what happened. Solomon, it's kind of a long story, but Solomon, he made sacrifices to God. God came to him in the middle of the night in a dream, and he said to him, he said, "What would you like for me to do for you, Solomon?" And Solomon said, "I want you to make me wise." And the scripture says because he didn't ask for wealth or long life or protection or victory over his enemies, because it wasn't self-serving, because it was something that he wanted to use to serve God with, God was very pleased with what he asked. And he made him the wisest man on the earth. King Solomon. The man was wise. You know what he did best? He organized. He organized and he created systems of management. And he was so great at this. And under his reign, man, Israel just thrived. And this is what happened because of his wisdom. He increased the wealth of Israel. It was exponential. He kept, it said, I wish I could remember exactly. Maybe I should have put this in here, but it said gold and silver were like stones in the kingdom. You imagine that? It's everywhere. Silver and gold everywhere in the kingdom. And so he increased the wealth of Israel because of the gift that God gave him. He kept the nation united. Boy, that's a chore, you know. I want to tell you something, though. When things are organized, when things are neat and clean and organized and put together, people feel better. I'm not making this up. There are real studies that show people feel better. And so because of his organizational skills and because of his ability to put systems in place and put things in order, he was able to keep his nation united. And he kept peace with his enemies. You know, when you're trading with somebody and you're doing business with them, you know, it's not in their best interest to make you angry and to fight with you. When you're making money and they're making money, and it's good for everybody, then it's hard to have so many enemies. So he increased the wealth of Israel, kept the nation united, and kept peace with his enemies. And I want to share with you a scripture. I want to share with you a scripture this morning about keeping peace with your enemies. I love this. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Who wrote that? Solomon. Solomon wrote that. I love it. When a man's way, this is what he found out. He said, when your ways please the Lord, God makes even your enemies to be at peace with you. That's something good for us to know. Because God has stuff for us to do. And He has a gift for us to use. He does. And when we use those gifts, remember, make sure your ways please God, and He will make your enemies to be at peace with you. So, God let him build the temple. God gave him a gift, and He gave him a legacy. And God wants to give you a legacy. God has a legacy for you to leave. He doesn't want you to leave this world having left nothing behind. He wants you to leave a legacy. There are all kinds of legacies. You can leave relational legacies. You can leave material legacies. You can plant things in your children that when you're long gone, they're still planting those in their children. Their children are planting those things in their children. It's a beautiful thing to leave a legacy. And Solomon left lots of legacies, but mainly, some people will argue with this, okay? But conventional wisdom and most scholars believe that Solomon wrote Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs, as it's called in some Bibles. And then he also wrote another book called The Wisdom of Solomon, and that did not make it into the Bible, but that was another book that he wrote. So Solomon had a legacy. He had a legacy. And so this is what Solomon looks like in your future. You may have a sin in your past, but there is a Solomon in your future. God has a project for you to do. He has a gift for you to use, and He has a legacy for you to leave. Anybody on board with that? You okay with that? You okay that God has a project for you to do? Are you okay that He has a gift for you to use? Are you okay that He has a legacy for you to leave? Yeah. Once God told me that He wanted me to do something, and I found all three of these in one thing that He wanted me to do. I had never spoken in front of a group before. And I didn't want to do this project that He was telling me to do, but I started having dreams about it, and people started asking me, and I knew that God was telling me that He wanted me to do jail ministry. And I wanted to do anything but jail ministry. It was that is a tough one for me. But what I found is that in that project that He wanted me to do, I found my gift that I could stand up in front of people and I could tell them about Jesus, and it would make a difference. And these guys in this jail, just so God could drive the point home with me that He had a gift for me to use, every time I went to this jail, every week for a year and a half, and hundreds of guys, every time I went to speak to them and use this new gift that God had given me, that I didn't even know that I had, every time I went, every single one of those guys that had not gotten saved or had come down to receive Jesus the week before or the week before that or the week before that, all the new guys, they all came down. I never had one person that did not come to Jesus over that year and a half except for one guy, and I don't want to tell this whole story because I'm overtime anyway, but one guy didn't come. His name was Wooly. And he didn't come because they threw him in jail in the middle of my talk. And he told me, everybody came down to the altar, which was the bars. They came down to the altar call when I gave the altar call. And they all came down. And I said, Wooly, I said, you want to come? He said, nah, man, I'll come next week. And he did. Next week, he came. And a legacy to leave. There was, I have friends in that town where I used to go to the jail. They've since torn that jail down because it was a terrible jail. It was an awful place to be. And a guy came looking for me that was in the jail. And he said, I want to find that guy, Pastor Rob. I want to find him. Where is he? I don't know how many. God, I never counted. I don't know how many, but hundreds of guys came to Jesus over that year and a half, the best that I can count. Behold, we're talking about love. Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called the children, the huios, the heirs of God, the children, the real children of God. Therefore, the world does not know us because it did not know Him. Doesn't know us because it did not know Him. Beloved, now we are the children of God. And this is supposed to encourage y'all, by the way. Beloved, now we are the children of God, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when He is revealed, we will be like Him. Whew. Does that not get anybody? I love that. We know that we don't know much, but we know this. We don't know much, but we know that when He is revealed, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. Fact is, we're going to see Him as He is before He's ever even revealed, we're going to know. I think this is what He's doing in this world right now, and I think that's why the church is so important right now. And everyone who has this hope in Him purifies himself just as He is pure. This is my goal. This is my ministry. This is what I do. I try to encourage you. I'm not a great teacher. There's certain things that I can do, certain things I can't do. I'm not a great scholar. I'm not a great teacher. But I feel like that I have been put here to encourage. And the encouragement is this, that if you'll have this hope that you are more than just a regular old person, not on a log, insignificant human in this world, and that you are a child, a huios, a son of the living God, and that if you have this hope in you, you will be purified by that hope. That is my mission in this world.